Okay, so I've been talking about behavior a lot. I'm just going to not get into any of the definitions of behavior, but understand that what behavior is exactly is a complex subject. A graduate student from Berkeley, performed a big survey of professional scientists at meetings and summarized his results about how contradictory everyone's notion of behavior is. We don't need to get into the definitions too much. At its most basic, it can be thought of as the observable actions of an organism. Something simple like that. And then you can decide whether you think plants and algae and other creatures have behaviors. I'm mostly focused on animal behavior. But behavioral ecology is really an evolutionary and ecological approach to animal behavior. And this is what the ethologists started, because they were studying their organisms in an evolutionary context, in nature oftentimes, and they had an ecological and evolutionary sensibility about their approach. So they laid the groundwork for a behavioral ecology. Note something else about behavior. Not sure how much this came up in the evolution section. But if behavior varies among individuals, which it often does, if behavior varies among individuals have different types of behavior within a population, within a species. And if that variation in behavior has a genetic basis, if it can be inherited, then according to Darwinian principles, that behavior can be acted upon by natural selection, and it can evolve, right? So you can get the evolution of behaviors by natural selection if these two things hold, that behavior is variable among individuals, and it is, and if it sometimes has a genetic basis, which it does. So certainly you can get the evolution of behavior in that sense. Behavioral ecology, meanwhile, and you can scribble all these things down if you want, or you can just look at the slide later. Behavioral ecology is based on the assumption that animals increase their fitness by minimizing energetic costs and maximizing benefits. Now, behavioral ecology has changed a lot over the last 10 years, but that was really at the heart of much of it. This emphasis on trade-offs and minimizing costs and maximizing benefits. So a cost-benefit analysis of behaviors in organisms in an evolutionary context. Cool type of study if you like to interact and work with living organisms. Optimal foraging is a big field of study that's really a part of behavioral ecology. This study is explored in your book. It's a neat study. I don't have the original reference on here, but it's one guy's work up in Canada on crows, particularly northwestern crows, and whelks, a type of mollusk that lives in the ocean, a sea snail if you want. It's a whelk. And these crows, the locals all know up there, like to pick up these whelks and drop them onto a hard surface. Because, as you might imagine, that shell's really hard, and a crow can't crack it with its bill, but it can drop it and crack it that way and eat the very nutritious material inside. You can go down and take the bus down University to the marina and walk out on the pavement out there and see broken mussels. And if you watch long enough, you can see it every day. The gulls take mussels from the water, and they bring them over to the parking lots down at the marina, or at the Berkeley Marina, and drop them and perform this very behavior. Gulls do it as well. Other birds do it. What this study involved was an analysis of the costs associated with doing this for the crow. Because the shell doesn't always break on the first drop. Sure, it'll break. It's more likely to break if you fly higher. But if you fly higher, you spend more energy in flying high. So theoretically, if the principles of behavioral ecology that I just mentioned on the previous slide hold, there should be some optimum where the bird flies. There should be a height optimum that the bird would fly to that will maximize the likelihood of the shell cracking and minimize the energetic investment of flying. And so what was done was a lab study of sorts where just the shells, without the birds, were taken to different heights and dropped to determine, and what was counted was how many drops it took at each height to crack the whelk. So if you just go 2 meters off the surface, you have to perform a large number of drops to crack the shell. But if you go 5 meters up, you need a much lower number of drops to crack the shell. Well, what the investigators also computed was total flight height, which is just the product of the two, I believe, the product of the number of drops versus the height. And in computing the total flight height as a single variable to encompass the cost of opening shells at different heights, they determined the optimum flight height to be 5 meters. That's the green bar there. What the red arrow shows here is the field study of the crows themselves, the height at which they tended to fly to drop the whelks. And it's a very close match, obviously. The crows tended to fly about that high on average. And based on their lab study, that was about the height that would be optimum for minimizing costs and maximizing benefits. So it fit an optimal foraging model of behavioral ecology. But we need to be careful, and that's something that the whole field was chastened by, the recognition that organisms are not always seeking optima. Partly, and even if they are always seeking optima in their behaviors, there's so many variables in their environments and in their worlds that they can't achieve optima in all aspects of their behavior. It's similar to the way that organisms are not morphologically perfectly designed, because there are constraints and trade-offs in anatomical design, just like there are constraints and trade-offs in behavior, and each behavior is set into the context of a whole suite of behaviors. So we need to be careful about always thinking of organisms as optimality machines or something like that. Organisms are also flexible in their behaviors, and they can learn, and they can be clever, and they have degrees of freedom in their behavior. They're not just a set of fixed action patterns. And the crows, again, show this nicely. Crows belong to a family of birds called corvids, right? And they include the jays and a whole bunch of other birds. And they're by any measure, they're smart birds. What do we mean by that? Well, that's for you to wrestle with your own definitions. But you can see what smart means in a context like this. Here's another crow, New Caledonian crow. Click the study there if you want. It's trying to, it's got a weighted object here with a U hook on it, and there's a food reward either under it or on it. And it needs to get out of this pipe this heavy object that has a U-shaped hook on it. And it has a wire. It's given a wire. And so it runs around, it probes in there with its straight wire to try to get the food reward, and is not having much success. So it takes the wire out, gives it a little bend, puts a nice little hook bend on it. That's better. Gotta be pretty strong, too. Yeah, figured that one out. There's all kinds of cool anecdotes like that from natural settings. ice fishermen, you go to Minnesota, and one of the great sports of a place like Minnesota is ice fishing in the winter, right? You go cut a hole in the ice and you sit there with a fire on the frozen lake and you fish. Well, also more commercial fishermen in those contexts will leave their hook in the water and leave it on the ice. Well, sometimes the crows come along and pull up the line. If they notice that there might be a fish on it, they'll go and they'll drag the line up out of the water and eat the fish. Clever creatures. However you measure that. Most of those types of studies of intelligence have been centered on primates, cetaceans, dolphins, and things. But it extends much more broadly than that. And the phenomenon of teaching and learning is being formally studied in a wide range of creatures. A nice study on teaching and learning in meerkats has come out over the last couple of years. But the primates still provide some of the best examples of learning in a social environment, usually from a parent. And there are obvious evolutionary benefits to raising an offspring that learns complex behaviors that allow it to survive better in its environment. So here's a hidden camera in an equatorial African forest that some chimps approach. And it's a mother with her baby approaching. She's got two sticks. She's got one in her mouth and she's got one in her hand. And the two sticks come from different plant species. One is stout and the other is long and thin. And she's never seen the camera before. They've just set it up. So you'll see her react. The camera makes a click. I can try to get some audio up here. The camera makes a click and you'll see her jump initially because she's responding to this new thing that she's not used to. Yeah, and then you can watch a different video of chimps at a nutting station here. And one thing you notice when you watch a parent chimp performing a complex behavior where their offspring's sitting nearby, the offspring's really watching closely. They're really watching. They may not at all be capable of holding the objects involved, but they're watching. And the parent is not necessarily actively teaching, but it's also not turning it back to the offspring. It may intentionally face the offspring as it performs the behavior. So they don't teach like we teach, but there's probably some continuity in the way across organisms, in the way they teach and learn. So she's relaxed enough to be able to perform her normal behaviors, but she knows there's something weird that wasn't there before in the form of this camera. And what she is she's got a cemetery. So that mound on the right is a big termite mound. So she takes her stout stick and drives it into the cemetery, forms a nice hole there. Not babies off being distracted as babies will do. These investigators here have tons of video of this available, and this is just one part of it. So she's driven that stout stick into the cemetery. Eventually she'll extract it and then uses the stick from the other species, which is a better approach, and inserts that into the termite nest and stitches the termite. She'll put the stick in, the soldier termites will attack that stick, grasp onto it, she takes them out and eats the termites off like it's a popsicle or something. And it's a complex behavior. This series here lasted 30 minutes or an hour of activity. To choose the right stick, to fasten them at the right size and the right way, to know where in the cemetery to best insert them, it's a whole complex set of activities that over the seasons the baby will learn from the mother. Really very often the mother and its offspring that are involved in this exchange. The female plays a central role in this dynamic, not only in chimps but in many other creatures. Here's a baby getting a taste. He's just getting a reward. He knows there's a camera too. Hi. He's obviously seen it before, but he'll get better at it, he or she. All right, let's form a quick bridge to humans and culture. It's not really going to be a part of my section, this whole question of what is culture and the evolution of tools, but we'll do a little bit with it in the hominin ecology section of this module. So let's look at another example of chimps. These are chimps in a different part of Africa. These are chimps that live in more of a savanna environment rather than the tropical rainforest environment, more open country. And so it's a relatively closed savanna. So this would be like savanna woodland or something. Lots of trees, lots of nice trees, but open patches of grass as well in Fongoli. And this has been well documented in part because the great wildlife photographer Franz Lanting went there and took these great pictures of these chimps. This is really wild circumstances, but Lanting was able to get in there and take these photos, bathing or just cooling off in a little swampy puddle, hanging out in the trees. All these chimps are known by name, having been studied for quite a while now. Well, she was one of the lead investigators, and over time they started to find sticks like this that had been manipulated by the chimps, particularly at the ends. And over time they watched how these sticks were used. They're broken and then they're fashioned with the teeth at this end, and they were seen to probe into tree holes with the sticks. That's a young one doing it, but it was mostly the adults that do it. And they decided that these things were spears. So when Jane Goodall originally saw chimps hunting for termites using a tool, it revolutionized anthropology. Louis Leakey freaked out when he heard Jane Goodall's results. Well, this caused a little splash because this was fashioning like a warlike instrument, a spear. What were they doing with this? What are they looking for in those holes? Bush babies. Yummy. So these little bush babies, another little primate that lives in those tree holes, can only be had by a sharpened spear. As you reach in, you probe around, and bush baby on a popsicle stick. And chimps love that. So that's grotesque, right? And that just sort of crosses the line. Chimps aren't supposed to be hunters and killers with spears. Well, there you have it. So if that jostles your assumptions, well, so be it. That's what they do. So how are humans different in this context? Well, human brains have increased simultaneously with the sophistication of human hands over evolutionary time. And we're extremely handy and heavily encephalized with big brains and good hands, and a long process of technological evolution in a social context that involves not only teaching and learning, but the documentation of results. In historical time, the documentation of results in terms of encoded information, like writing. So for me, the bridge is pretty easily built between early human evolution and the use of tools with non-human evolution in primates and other organisms. A cultural behavior can be defined as one that is transmitted repeatedly through social or observational learning to become a characteristic of the population. one of the main differences in the way humans use tools from the way the chimps did or any other organism that I've ever seen in the wild. And if you find a violation of this notion, please tell me. I would love to hear about it. But humans use tools to make other tools. We have sort of this meta tool production. The chimp will just go break the branch and, I don't mean to belittle its tool using behavior, but it'll break the branch and strip it of its bark, maybe sharpen the end. But a human will take a stone, choose another stone, and fashion from that second stone a tool that it wants using the first stone. So it uses a tool to make a tool. And that step I don't see in natural populations of other organisms. You can teach a gorilla to do that in a lab in Santa Cruz, sure. You can teach a gorilla to make a tool with another tool. But show me one in the wild that has evolved doing that. I would love to hear about it. That's all for today, folks.